first of all, if you look like this, you're not allowed to describe yourself as a man.
Until you express views that are original or important in some way, you shouldn't call yourself amazing. It is not amazing to regurgitate politically correct orthodoxy on matters of race. That is rather unamazing.
The reason that white Europeans became the most powerful force on the planet is because we had the best resources.
Anyone who seriously sought to understand or explain the reasons why some civilizations rise to higher heights than others would not have said what you just said. The causes of the wealth generated by civilizations cannot be pinned on one single cause to the total exclusion of another, as you attempted to do. Think about how idiotic it would be to suggest that everything has to do with resources and nothing has to do with intelligence. What good are resources without minds to make use of them?
It had everything to do with our agricultural superiority. The fact that we had better crops and better animals to help us work the land. It has nothing to do with us being smarter.
Now, where do you suppose agriculture comes from? Is it just a matter of luck that some people happen across fields of wheat? Or do those fields of wheat require a lot of planning and a lot of work? And does some amount of intelligence have something to do with the productivity of wheat fields?
Yeah, I do believe that bin Laden was responsible for 9/11.
You know, I tend to agree with you about bin Laden being primarily responsible for 9/11. It could have been that he had some assistance from within inside the government, or it could have been that government stupidity allowed 9/11 to take place. But I believe that the primary blame resides with bin Laden and the ideology that fueled him. Now some people have alternative theories, and apparently Meramite Man 4 is one of those people. But there are people on the left who have alternative theories, there are Muslims who have alternative theories, there are black people and white people and people of all races and backgrounds who, for whatever reason, don't believe that a band of young Islamic radicals hijacked planes and crashed them into the Pentagon and World Trade Center as an expression of jihad. But I fail to see how refuting alternative theories of 9/11 validates or invalidates your views on race or Meramite Man 4's views on race.
All this fucking prosperity and shit, like, you know, iPhones and fucking cars and like a roof over my head and a steady food supply.
Yeah, you know, things that are largely absent in Africa. If you had the ability to go back in history and make the entire world one race, the African race, what do you suppose the odds are that you would be sitting here on YouTube making videos? Do you think that would be possible with African technology, absent the influence of the white man and Asian ingenuity? I mean, I know your firmly held view is that there's no relationship between race and intelligence, but what probability would you assign to there being some variation that may have had something to do with the ability to develop new technologies? I mean, would you give it maybe, you know, a 1% probability that maybe things would have turned out differently if we were all made of African Negroid genetics? Or is it just, is your ideology that not only is there 0.000% variation in the distribution of intelligence among biogeographical populations, but that there is zero probability of there being anything other than 0% variation? I mean, is that how religiously you hold your views? Or is there some room maybe for a chance that maybe, you know, there's a slight variation that resulted in iPhones and YouTubes and things like that that might not have existed if the whole world's fate was left up to Africans? It's just something to ponder.
When you do put more black people in an area, you do introduce more poverty to that area. But it's the black people who are poor. It's not the white people. It's not like the poverty spreads like a virus to everyone.
That's true.
The black people are usually the ones who are poor, because this country is fucking racist.
That's not I mean, get real. Black people in the United States represent the wealthiest population of black people in the entire world. It is not black people in Senegal, in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, in Zimbabwe, where there is virtually no white racism against blacks, where blacks have total control of their own destiny. It is not those countries where blacks are wealthy. It is the countries where blacks have access to the economic and political structures produced primarily by whites, where blacks are wealthiest. You can even see this in South Africa. South Africa, under the racist apartheid regime, was the most prosperous and, by African standards, the most humane country in all of sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, since 1995, when the socialist ANC took control of the country, since that time, South Africa's Human Development Index, and this is measured by the United Nations, hardly a source that is favorable to my views. According to the United Nations, conditions in South Africa have deteriorated since the white minority rule gave way to black majority rule. Prior to that time, standards of living had been steadily rising for all races in South Africa. Now let's take a look at Zimbabwe. What has happened to Zimbabwe since it transitioned from white minority rule to black majority rule? Well, it has been an absolute disaster for everybody in the country except for Robert Mugabe and his minions. So according to your view of racism being the source of relative prosperity among the races, you would have to suppose then that I guess Asians in the United States are the most racist group of people in the whole country, right? Because if they're prosperous, then they must be racist. And if they're not prosperous, then they must be victims of racism. And where do you suppose Asians get all this power? I mean, they're a relatively small minority. Or maybe it's because all white people secretly want Asians to succeed more than whites. But wait, you said white people can't be racist against whites, so that doesn't really make sense. I don't know what it is, but it couldn't have anything to do with innate ability. Couldn't have anything to do with culture. So let's see, if we can't ascribe Asian prosperity to white racism, then to what could we ascribe it? Let's see, what else is there? Oh, right, Unamazing Atheist, you said that it's all based on resources. Right, so if they have resources, they'll be prosperous, unless there's racism to drive them down. So that must mean that Asians have the most resources. Oh, right, that would explain why Japan and Hong Kong are so prosperous. They're so rich in resources.
Would I be scared walking through a bad neighborhood in Detroit? Yeah, I would. I'd also be scared walking through a fucking trailer park here in Louisiana.
Oh, really? How do you suppose the homicide rate in Detroit compares with the homicide rate in Louisiana trailer parks? You might want to look into that.
In fact, I'd probably be more scared as a black guy in a fucking, trucker bar than I would as a white guy walking through, Detroit or Compton.
Yeah, because I've heard that there are still trucker bars out there that won't serve blacks. And that would be absolutely a horrifying experience. I couldn't imagine being turned away from a bar by some big trucker bouncer who says you'll have to go somewhere else. That would just be absolutely horrifying, whereas compared to walking through the streets of Compton or Detroit late at night as a white guy, all I'd have to worry about is being mugged, beaten, or killed.
Maybe I'm alone on this, but would you guys rather be a white person walking through the ghetto or a black person who just walked into a bar filled with guys, white guys missing teeth and construction shirts, and they all just turn to look at you the second you walk in the door what's that nigger doing here?
Your impression of a redneck white trash construction worker with missing teeth is spot on. But you still don't scare me.
The notion that I hate white people or that I'm racist against white people is pretty damn preposterous. I hate stupid people.
If you can hate yourself for being stupid, then you can also hate yourself for being white.